Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk about me. Because I think now is a good time for a little reflection. The end of August marked 2 years since my first upload on this channel, and I'll be straight with you. Those 2 years have been the best 2 years of my entire life. In that time I've made a lovely little community that celebrates DBD's lore and characters, as well as a certain pair of French siblings. The fishing begins, Kate! Ha ha! Ha ha! Ha ha! Fishing complete! Ha ha! Worked with some truly wonderful people I'd never have met otherwise, and made a lot of videos I'm deeply proud of. This video isn't about any of that. Today I'll be talking about a video that I made a little while ago now, that I'm really not very much proud of. An old shame that I always look back on as a black mark of my time on this platform. And no, it isn't the one Raid sponsored, those guys were actually pretty chill. And nor is it one of those really old ones where I was recording on my headset mic with 5 frames a second and the aspect ratio of Etch-a-Sketch. Those are technically garbage, but they were baby steps made on my beaten up old gaming laptop and they have their charm. A couple from that era, like my Hag video, actually aged really well. It's this one. What's Up with Mikaela Reid? Released on October 25th, 2021. Ever since I made it, its presence has been bugging me because it was probably the only video I've ever made that I think was made in true, spiteful bad faith. By that, I mean I went into it basically knowing what I was going to say before I read a single word of story, and I wound up twisting my criticism to suit my preconceived biases about the character instead of taking the evidence as it came. There's a few reasons for this, the biggest one being that my attitude to DBD at the time had basically never been worse. I let my frustrations out and all the shit going around me out on Mikaela and on that video. That was unfair of me, and it's something that I've tried very hard to steer clear of since that video came out. Worth remembering, October last year was the Pinhead NFTs, launch Circle Healing and making killer games miserable, and a lot of personal stuff was happening at that time in my life as well. That October was me at my worst. It shouldn't be surprising that the content I was making there was probably some of my worst as well. With Mikaela taking centre stage as the survivor in the upcoming Tome 13, I thought there'd be no better time for me to look back on that video, that mistake of my personal history, and close the book on it once and for all. But what's so bad about it? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to lead through the video bit by bit, and every time I say something unbelievably stupid or worth learning from, I'm going to stop and talk about it a bit. Oh yeah, before we get going, that chaptering is so fucking shonky, holy shit. I don't know how that happened or how to get rid of them, so we're just going to have to live with it, okay? Mikaela is very different from the survivors we've been getting in the last couple of years, and that's both a good and bad thing. But it's not even like good or bad mixed together. At least to me, it's quite clear where the good and bad bits are, like oil floating on water in a glass. Here comes the first big issue, the oil and water analogy. To put it simply, it's bullshit. It massively oversimplifies what should be a more sophisticated criticism of the way Mikaela's story handles her dual identity of a writer and a witch. Even if every single thing I said going forward was 100% valid and correct, spoiler alert, it's not. That kind of injustice to the complexity of the topic I'm spending 25 minutes on isn't okay at all. Let's press on. Today we're going to take a look into her New Testament of lore to answer the question, what's up with Mikaela Reid? Okay, just a little thing. I've grown less fond of walls of text in my videos as of late. I hate when you notice me toning it down a little bit because it gets pretty hard to grok at times. I'd like to talk to you for a second about Honeygain, a web app that allows you to monetize your access internet connection and make some extra cash with no input needed on your part. Did you know these guys were my first and worst sponsor? I never actually saw any commission from them, but I don't know if that's because nobody used the link, or just because they were kinda sketchy. But if nobody did use it, I don't really blame you. As my first sponsor, I was kind of mesmerised by the potential of earning money through YouTube. I didn't really know enough about the product I was promoting. I've worked with some sponsors I really liked. Opera GX and Rage Legends were great partners who communicated well and offered good compensation. But Honeygain, yeah, those guys were probably not legit, and I feel awful ever taking them on. Mikaela Reid is a young English woman who works at the Moonstone coffee shop, an eccentric coffee shop at the artsy end of town. I somehow missed an opportunity for some really solid comedy here, and commentary on a choice of the barista job as a contrast to the glamorous or adventurous lives of most of the other survivors, but I just forgot to be funny this time. Honestly, this whole section where I just exposit Mikaela's story at you is a style I've grown less fond of over time. These days I prefer to track through the character's story, breaking it down thematically as I go, like I did in my Yui video. A Halloween costume style which doesn't really work in DBD. I don't think it ever could. Okay, here's where my issues start to be less stylistic and more substantial. Right away, I operate under the assumption that behaviour wanted Mikaela to be a Halloween style witch, and that's just wrong. Blatantly wrong. I don't even really know where I got that from. But I don't think we can take Mikaela and her witchery very seriously, because in many ways she's kind of a laughable character. Yeah, okay, and? Mikaela isn't a killer. She's not really meant to be this threatening eldritch presence like the Hag or subsequent supernatural killers like the Dredge. One of my biggest oversights in this video is Mikaela's unique role as a benign supernatural presence in the entity's realm. Like, this is such a nothing burger of a criticism, and I hate that I made it. Mikaela Reid makes me cringe. And there we have it. Everything wrong with this video is summed up in a single sentence. I let my personal irritations about the character and DBD as a whole at the time cloud my judgment, and that's something I've regretted for a while. There's a reason I don't use language like that anymore in my current criticism, or at least save it for sections that are explicitly jokes and keep my serious critiques serious. The rest of this chapter is mostly me projecting my own experiences with some thoroughly unpleasant people in my personal life onto this fictional character, which is the perfect showcase of someone with A+ tier media literacy. I'm not even going to grace the rest of this chapter with a response because, fuck it, it doesn't deserve it. Whereas the witch identity suffers from Mikaela being a faintly ridiculous figure, it allows her to bring something to the survivor roster that we haven't seen in a very long time. Mikaela has broken the girl boss formula. Skipping forward to this bit, and I have mixed feelings about what I say here. On one hand, I think my observations about how formulaic a lot of original survivors were at the time did hold water. I just went about criticising it in the most obnoxious, Reddity way possible. It's a perfect showcase of how poor language use can ruin an otherwise fine piece of criticism. I had a decent point about how Mikaela is a breath of fresh air after a long run of survivors who ended up fulfilling the same basic archetype, and phrased it like a troglodyte, who spends his free time complaining about how She-Hulk twerking with Megan Thee Stallion is destroying Western civilization. That isn't me defending She-Hulk, mind you, that show is still painfully unfunny, but that's beside the point. Moving swiftly on. And the reason that works, despite the witch identity not really working for her, is her identity as an aspiring writer, which tells a far more compelling and believable story, which ties more completely into her lore. Because for most of Mikaela's story, she doesn't really do anything witchy. I should definitely have done more research here, I'll be real with you. I didn't know enough about modern day witchery going forwards, and I really didn't take the time to learn about it that I should have done. If I was making this video today, I'd do a lot more research and reading ahead of time. Maybe even conduct an interview to get a sense of how self-proclaimed witches feel out Mikaela's role in DBD's roster. Instead, I just went off my preconceived notions, assuming I knew best, and that backfired really badly to make the end product just painful to watch. If you remove all the references to Mikaela doing witchy things, lighting incenses, blessing coffee beans, the whole body butter business, you'll realise that nothing really changes. But if you remove all the references to her storytelling, you basically lose over a third of the story, including the entire ending, because her love of writing and telling stories defines her character far more. Speaking of painful to watch, this whole section is just garbage. I thought I was being clever and concise, but in reality I just wasn't evaluating the text properly. It's about as unscholarly as you can physically get, short of slicing your sources using crayons on a sticker book. There's a reason I never tried anything like this again, because it's just not a good way to criticise media, and if you think it is, then you should get some sleep, because you clearly need it. Because I say this as someone who was a young aspiring writer myself, and to some degree still is. Young aspiring writers are painfully cringy, because they all think they're going to be the next Mary Shelley, just because they feel a lot of emotions and know some long words. This is the one part of the video I actually quite like, because it's entirely my own perspective, totally unfiltered. There's none of the pretension or aggression of the rest of the video, and I wish the whole video had that tone. Then Julian becomes a much more relevant part of that story, because he supports and enables its aspirations. Bloody hell, that mid-sentence pause was jarring. Behaviour's insistence that we take the witch identity seriously is the biggest roadblock to this. It was clearly forced onto her to make boon totems fit thematically, and it shows in how the witchy elements of her character just don't work in tandem with the rest of it. Yeah, but behaviour never insists this at all. That's just me projecting my expectations of what I want a character to be onto Mikaela when she was never meant to be that. Once again, that's a me problem. The bits where I talk about Haddie and Lisa's grandmother aren't offensive, I kinda stand by them, and while Haddie's arrival in Dead by Daylight in the Roots of Dread chapter was fantastic, I still don't really get why she didn't deserve solo survivor billing. And that old lady survivor I talked about, we still haven't got one, and that makes me very, very sad. Jeff's a fucking great character. I love Jeff. He's positive masculinity in action, thematically fits with his killer, and nobody plays him, because he's a big beardy bloke in a leather jacket. You really think Behaviour would take the risk of making an old black woman the star of a solo survivor release without a killer to push up the sales figures? Just like earlier sections, I think my point here is valid, but I went about it the wrong way completely. Instead of properly looking into why characters like Jeff, Adam, Tap, and even Ash don't get played, I just take it for granted and move on. But I guess this really isn't the video for that, so, it's not too bad. The rest of the video is mostly just summing up what's already been said, so I'm just going to leave it there. But I hope you can understand why I want to take this video and just grill it, because there's so much I dislike about the concept and execution behind it. I didn't take it down because it's sponsored, and I'm still not going to take it down because it's a perfect reminder of how to not make a video that people are going to enjoy and learn from. Because that's all I ever wanted to do. Make stuff that encourages examining our favourite characters in new and interesting ways. I want to look back on my old work fondly, but I'm only human and I make mistakes, just like we all do. And I'm sorry to anybody who saw the video when it came out for effectively wasting your time. But that's okay, so long as I learn from those mistakes. I like to think that my recent body of work has shown to you that I have. For every video I regret making, there's half a dozen I'm very proud of and can look back on fondly, but nobody ever got better by mixing satisfaction and complacency. It's cool to celebrate something good, like a channel milestone or a good chapter release, but it's just as important to remember when things don't go so well and learn from them. To everyone who rightfully criticised me in the comments of that video, thank you, because I learned a lot from the immediate aftermath of that video's release. And if you've been watching these past 2 years, whether you were there from day one or you only found me yesterday, thank you, from the bottom of my heart. You guys have let me do the best job in the world, and it'd be a disservice to every single one of you if I didn't do it right. So here's to you, friends and foes, survivors and killers. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Well, but that concludes my thorough self-roasting, shall we say. What do you think of it? Do you think I was too harsh on myself? Is there something that you think I missed out on? Which of my videos throughout these past 2 years has been your favourite or least favourite? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. While you're here, please do feel free to subscribe if you're new to the channel and ring the notification bell if you don't want to miss another upload, because I've got some exciting stuff in the pipeline. Thank you for these past 2 years, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.